You're listening to Bigger Than Belief, real stories about real faith with real people whose belief is unbelievable. I'm your host, Adam Duxter. Thank you for listening to Bigger Than Belief. Today is Thursday, March 5th. Today we're looking at some new data released by the American Jewish Committee. They're a Jewish civil rights and advocacy group and have been around for more than 100 years. And this month, they released a new report on anti-Semitism in America in 2025 with a couple of key takeaways. Per their findings, 9 out of 10 Jews in America feel less safe. 31% say they were a target of an anti-Semitic incident, and more than half have changed their behavior in some way. Today's guest, well, she falls into that last category. Leslie Chudnoff is a retired librarian and a Jewish woman living in the Twin Cities metro. And just last month, she founded a Minnesota chapter of a growing national Jewish gun owners organization called Lox and Loaded. This org now has 43 chapters in 20 states with thousands of members. And on this episode, she shares why gun ownership for many American Jews is rare because of the religion itself, as well as the response that she has seen in the last month as she has got this thing up off the ground. It's a fascinating conversation and one I think you'll really enjoy. So now I don't want to waste any more time. Here is Leslie Chudnoff. We're now joined by a very special guest, someone I'm very excited to talk to, someone I only met just a couple of days ago over the phone, but has a really compelling story. We're joined by Leslie Chudnoff. You live in the South Metro, a Minnesota transplant, but your story is so just unique and fascinating to me. Thank you so much for making time out of your Thursday to join us.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So your Minnesota story, if we want to start with that, you're by way of California. You've only been here for how long?
I moved here in 2018.
Okay. And before that, tell me about your life.
Well, I worked for the Los Angeles Public Library System for the last 30 years of my career. I was a branch manager and a department manager for the last 18 years. I managed 2 branches, and my first promotion was to manage Teenscape, which was a young adult services department, and it was the first and the only of its kind in the United States at the time. So people would come from all over the world to see our department. Everyone knows what children's services is in a public library, but teens were kind of off to the side, and LAPL decided they needed to do something special just for the teens in the community. So we had a very big department that focused strictly on middle and high school age students, kind of took them out of the kids area and gave them a space of their own.
And that's professional life, and for personal, especially faith life, for anyone who's watching, they'll see your necklace and your pins, but for people who are just listening, I'd love to know a little bit about just your faith walk and your faith journey for people who've never met you before.
Oh, okay. Well, I was raised in the South Milwaukee suburbs in the North Shore, and I was raised in a Reform synagogue. And I didn't find it particularly fulfilling. It seemed kind of like Judaism light to me, and it was more social. And I was a kid, and when I was growing up, I just associated that with religion. And I didn't really do much other than the holidays until I was in my 50s, and my mom was passing away, and I hadn't belonged to a synagogue in Los Angeles. I would go to services occasionally, and I tried different synagogues, but I didn't belong anywhere. And when my mom was in the hospital at the end of her life, I wanted them to find me a rabbi. And he came in, and I said, I made a bargain with God. I said, please let my mother live, and I'll join a synagogue. Well, my mom didn't live. And I asked the rabbi, I'm going to come to services. When do you go? And he said, well, we don't really do Friday nights. We do Saturday mornings. So I thought, I need to find something. And the president of my Friends of the Library Board and several of my colleagues and people from my dog training club, I have dogs, I'm involved with dog showing and training, all belong to one conservative synagogue in Northridge in the San Fernando Valley. So I said, can I go with you? So I ended up joining the synagogue. We had a wonderful rabbi. It was his first position, and he was young, and he was brilliant. I always told my friends that I thought he was a cross between Billy Crystal and a Hasidic rabbi. He was brilliant. He was funny. He was kind. And I enjoyed the conservative synagogue because it's kind of academic. Like with where I belong now, Temple of Aaron, there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of studying. And I found that very fulfilling. And growing up Reform, I didn't have a bat mitzvah. They barely did that with the boys, let alone a girl in a Reform synagogue. So I had an adult bat mitzvah at the age of 56. And it was a class of 10 of us. And normally these classes take a long time. I think ours ran through 9 months. And I became a Torah reader. So I would read Torah on Saturday mornings. And I just became very involved with the synagogue. When I moved here, I went to a Reform synagogue for a while. I didn't know where to go. I had a neighbor who belonged, but she never went, and I didn't want to go by myself. And a friend of hers that I met, because we all went to the Minnesota had a Jewish theater company. It's now called 6 Points, but before I think it was Minnesota Jewish Theater Company. And she went to the conservative synagogue, Temple of Aaron. And I said, "Can I come with you?" And she said, "Sure." So that's how I ended up at Temple of Aaron.
Wow. So it was a pretty steady growth for you
Yes.
over the course of, more than a decade.
Well, I probably went from the 5th grade until I was an adult without belonging to a synagogue. So I had a huge gap. I always knew that I was Jewish. We celebrated the holidays. I respected my religion, but I didn't have an active synagogue membership until after my mom passed, and I joined the synagogue in Los Angeles the last 5 years that I was there.
The reason we've got you on, and for folks who are listening, they'll have heard this already by this point, but we've seen the reports of the rise in anti-Semitism. New report from the AJC, 55% of people have changed their behavior because of anti-Semitism. 9 out of 10 feel less safe. And we've seen something very unique happen, which is more people turning towards gun training, getting certified to have a gun. I'm curious for you how that kind of played out in your life, and kind of how you got to the position you are right now.
Okay, well, I shot in Los Angeles. I've actually been target shooting for about 13 years. So I wanted, to have some opportunity to do that when I moved here. And Stock and Barrel, the gun club that I belonged to, opened up the year after I moved here in Eagan, 6 miles from my house, and it was an indoor range. And I thought, well, this is really great. This is a nice opportunity for me. So I took a ladies class, I took a permit to carry class, and I showed them what I had. And I had a .22, which was like a target pistol. And I said, "Can I use this?" And the instructor looked at me and he shook his head. He said, "You need to get 2 of those. You need a couple of 6-shooters on your hips and you'll look like Annie Oakley." He said, "That's not a self-defense weapon. That's like a competition pistol. You need to get a handgun that you can carry." So I got a 9mm. I took the permit class, and I don't walk around in places where I feel unsafe that I need to do it, but it's a skill and it's something that I felt was important to have. And this was before the anti-Semitism issue even got started. So I was a shooter before. Now I'm glad I have this because people are scared. I don't feel frightened. I don't hide my Judaism. I'll wear my star. I'll wear my pins. I don't make do any modifications of my behavior because I'm concerned. But I'm conscious, and I have been in environments where people have made anti-Semitic comments. I've got family who are real active politically, and I was very disappointed when I went to a political meeting and people were making anti-Semitic comments in the background and complaining about candidates that they felt were too supportive of Israel. And it was the first time that I really felt out of place and uncomfortable, and I thought, gee, there's anti-Semitism here. This isn't good. And this, after that, I decided I know I can protect myself. I have nothing to be afraid of. It's a skill, and I don't walk around in fear because I know that I can protect myself, but I'm watchful.
How did you get to the point where you're starting to involve others in this? Because Again, as the people who've listened to the intro to this podcast have heard, you kind of worked to establish a gun kind of club here within the Twin Cities. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So what happened was last year, I belong to Hadassah, which is also a Jewish women's organization, and we get a magazine every 2 months. And last spring, there was a feature on the rise of Jewish shooting clubs. Since October 7th, people have become very concerned, and Jewish people are starting to take up arms and learning how to shoot. And it's not something that's been common in the Jewish world. Hunting isn't part of Jewish culture. Our religion says we're not supposed to kill for sport. So even if someone were going to go hunting and kill for food, it wouldn't be kosher and you couldn't eat it. So even if you don't keep kosher, the mentality is there. It's just not part of, being a Jewish person. And while there are a lot of Jews in law enforcement, hunting was just never part of it. So I read this article about the rise of the clubs, and I looked to see if there was anything happening around here. And there really wasn't anything going on. Well, after October 7th, my shooting instructor, Dean O'Kay at Stock and Barrel, told me, I just got half a dozen new clients. They're all Jewish. They're very concerned. And they said they've never held guns before. They never considered owning a gun. They felt there was sort of a stigma to it. And all of a sudden, they want to learn how to shoot. They don't just want to learn how to shoot a gun. They want to know about gun safety. They want to know about safe storage. They want to know about the laws for owning a gun. And they want to know how to protect themselves because people are scared. And I know one person that he worked with said she had to catch her breath and hyperventilate in the parking lot before she could go in because she was so terrified about going in to pick up a gun. Well, that person now works there and is a shooting instructor, and she's becoming NRA certified. So what happened was I was looking online, and I happened to notice there's an organization called Lox and Loaded, and they have chapters all over the country. Right now, there are 43 active chapters in more than 20 states, and they have over 1,000 members. And the closest chapter to us was Chicago in the suburbs. And I looked and I thought, I wonder if they're going to plan to do anything in the Twin Cities. That would be really great if we could get something here. So I sent an email to their general email, and 5 minutes later, Gail Pearlstein, who is the person behind Lox and Loaded, emailed me back, and she said, yeah, we're really trying to get something started in the Twin Cities. And I said, well, what do you need to do that? She said, first, we need a shooting club or a range that's willing to serve as a host and sponsor us. And the second thing is we need a licensed firearms instructor to lead it. And so I said, well, I belong to a club, and I have an instructor. Let me talk to him, because he told me he's got a bunch of new Jewish students. And when he first told me that, I jokingly said to him, maybe we should start a Jewish shooting society. I never even thought it would get to this point. So what happened was I called him, and he said, let me talk to the owners of the club. I think we could really make this happen. And he talked to his higher-ups, and they were on board with it. They thought it would be a great way to show support for the Jewish community. They would get new members. It builds community. And I connected him with Gail, and they made the arrangements. And very quickly, the Twin Cities chapter of Lox and Loaded was born, and we had our first meeting in January. We meet the second Monday of each month between 6 and 8 p.m. at Stock and Barrel. And that's how it got started. And I am now the official ambassador for the Twin Cities chapter of Lox and Loaded.
When you had that first meeting, what was the response? I mean, how many people came?
It was phenomenal. We had about 34 people. When the TC Jew folk ran the article, they put my email down as a contact. I became inundated with requests. I must have answered 25, 30, 40, and they just kept coming. And people were messaging me on Facebook, and they were emailing, and I, gave my number out. So people were calling, and there was a lot of interest. Some people were concerned about driving across the river because, if you live in the Twin Cities, the Minneapolis people don't want to drive to St. Paul. The St. Paul folks don't want to come to Minneapolis. But we needed a host venue, and even though Stock and Barrel has another location, they would literally have to have enough people to start, a second chapter. So I said, you can shoot at Stock and Barrel, you can shoot wherever is closer to you, but our monthly meetings are going to be at the Eagan location. So Gail came up from Chicago for our first meeting, and she was blown away because we had about 34 people. She said, of all of the initial first-time chapter startup meetings, she's never seen a turnout as big as the one we had here in the Twin Cities.
What's it like when you're getting those emails and they're just pouring in?
I was kind of surprised. I knew we'd have interest. I was hoping we'd get a turnout, but it made me feel like I was doing something good for the community, that I was helping the Jewish community learn how to connect in a way that they could defend themselves and educate themselves. And, it's not just the shooting skills, it's the camaraderie. But it made me feel like I was doing something to help people in the Jewish community in the Twin Cities feel safer.
Who's coming to these?
We have everybody from 20-year-old guys to 85-year-old grandmothers. One woman who came to the first meeting told me she had been actually stopped by ICE because she thinks maybe because she had a Black Lives Matter bumper sticker on her car. She didn't know, but she said, I'm scared, and I'm not only worried about what's going on in the city, but I'm worried about anti-Semitism, and I don't think I'm too old to protect myself. And she said, I've never touched a gun in my life. So it was kind of neat because we had every range. We had men, we had women. Most of the emails coming in initially were men, and some of the men that came in actually had guns and had done some shooting before, but it was very minimal compared to the general population. Most of the folks had never even touched a gun in their lives before they came to this first class.
Do you feel like there is a stigma about firearms within the Jewish community? Because you mentioned the teaching and kind of the background with your faith where you don't hunt for sport. Many people don't hunt. For many Americans, that is the introduction to guns, is, going on a hunting trip.
Yeah.
And do you feel like there is a kind of, secondary effect because of that?
I don't know if I'd call it a stigma so much as just kind of a fear because it's not something that's normally been part of, the culture. And I think maybe, like when I grew up, I had friends. We didn't have guns in my house growing up, but I had friends who went duck hunting with their fathers, and they would have, the shotguns in the racks in their family room. They knew about gun safety. Nobody got hurt. Nobody shot anybody. There was no fear. There was no stigma. It just wasn't something that the Jewish community was used to. Unless you're in law enforcement, you weren't going to do that. So I don't know if it's so much, there is a bit of a stigma because I think people worry what other people might say if they think you're interested. We're not a bunch of gun advocates who found a club. We're people who got together to keep our community safe and to educate ourselves.
What happens at these meetings?
Well, it's usually a 2-hour session. After I get everybody checked in and registered, we start with a lesson. The first hour, Dino gives some kind of an educational lesson. It could be on different types of firearms, safety, storage. We have a virtual range that might be coming up for one of ours. So you get a educational portion for the first half. Gail also sends us a raffle prize so people get tickets if they belong to Lox and Loaded. And then we draw a prize winner, and then we spend the second hour going out on the range, and everybody gets some range time to shoot.
Do you find that you talked about the camaraderie, there is just even peace for you to be with other people? You talked about the fear so many people are feeling. When you're with other people, I'm sure that helps to mitigate that fear a little bit, right?
It does. I never had a fear of guns or a phobia of guns. I played with guns as a child, just like I played with dolls, But I think because of the Jewish community has tended to not be big on, they're often more liberal and sometimes a little more pacifistic in terms of weapons. And while I didn't have the stigma, other people did. But when they see somebody like me or other people there, and turned out they're employees of the gun club who are also Jewish, one gentleman is ex-military, and they see maybe there's nothing wrong with this because a gun is a tool. It's just something that, like any other piece of equipment, a gun isn't going to go off. It's not going to shoot anybody. It's a matter of people learning this is something I can use to protect myself. I want to know how to do this correctly. And once they realize that it's also a skill, and it's a sport. So I think once people realize that and the stigma goes away, they're more receptive. And I think the fear is going away for a lot of the people that I've talked to.
What about the fear just that has brought them in to begin with? You talked about the half dozen people that came, and your instructor was saying, if fear is what's driving people, to come here potentially, do you find that there is a relief from the fear when you're all together, or this has empowered people in some way? I mean, is this doing what you hoped it would do?
Oh, yeah. People do feel empowered. They feel more secure. They aren't walking. When you can protect yourself, you carry yourself with a certain level of confidence. You don't look like a victim. So I'm thinking maybe when people walk around and they know that they could protect themselves, their families, their synagogues, their friends, they don't behave in a fearful manner. They don't look like a target anymore. So for me, I think that the confidence level and the self-assurance that people are getting, where they know they could protect themselves if they had to, and there's nothing fearful about owning a gun, it's made a big difference.
How often do you see something in the news, whether it's here in the United States or across the world, where it just stops you and you say, this is why I'm
I see it every day. I get a lot of emails from Jewish organizations. I read statistics. It's not just happening in the United States. It's not just happening in the Twin Cities. It's happening all over the world. Look at Bondi Beach. You hear stories of Jewish school children. A girl got injured. Somebody fired something through a bus window, I think it was in Queens, New York. People who walk around wearing Jewish identification, like a star or a man with a kippah on his head, people are getting attacked in the street. And it's every day and it's all the time. And the rise has been exponential. And I think about it every day. But I don't have fear because I know that if I had to, I could protect myself. And I think just the thought of coming together with a group of like-minded people, and you don't have to be Jewish to join Lox and Loaded, by the way. It's for allies as well. So we're very inclusive. But I think building the camaraderie has taken the stigma away for a lot of people, because I don't care what the world thinks about guns. I care that I can protect myself, that we can protect our community.
You talked about the pacifism element, though, typically within Judaism.
Yes.
I mean, is there anything in the writings of the Torah, or just in your faith teachings that says this doesn't align with
No, actually, we are required to protect ourselves. So it's actually just the opposite.
That's written in...
It's written in the Torah. I mean, if obviously if it's a war or if there's an enemy, but there's a saying in Judaism, if you've saved one life, it's as if you've saved the entire world. So we do need to protect ourselves, and there's no stigma in our faith that tells us that we shouldn't be able to defend ourselves or have these skills. You go to Israel, everyone's in the army, so people are used to handling guns. That's just not part of, American life.
I think when you have these conversations around faith and firearms, I mean, the term, zealot, or like,
yes.
people have a picture in their mind, right?
Praise the Lord and pass the ammo. Yeah, I've heard that one before.
So do you feel like you're battling that stigma as you're doing this, of saying, we are not a religiously motivated, group that has intents to go,
we're not a militia. Correct. Yeah. I think that just having people become comfortable with us and accept that if we had to defend ourselves and take care of ourselves, our community, our family, our friends, that we could do that. So I think it's going away. I think people are coming to realize having a gun and having skills is just another way of learning how to do something to keep yourself safe. And I think it is taking away the stigma.
How big do you see this group potentially growing?
Wow. Well, we've had people that were out of town for we have snowbirds. So I'm expecting the group to grow as it progresses, and I think we could probably easily have about 40 people in our chapter. And I'm still getting calls, and I'm still getting messages from people. I haven't joined yet. Is it too late? Can I still come? So, it's a national movement. Like I said, we have 43 chapters nationwide. There are more than 1,000 members. 2 new chapters, I believe, we're just starting today, and more than 20 states. So,
and you credit that directly to what's going on.
Oh yeah, people are concerned. This was born out of October 7th and the fear that it inspired in the Jewish community. Because even before Israel started to fight back, we were already getting attacked. The anti-Semitism was rearing its head. And I don't think that it's like it wasn't there before, but I think circumstances have given people an outlet to feel like they can express it more freely, and it's put the Jewish community on edge.
How often do you think about it?
I think about it every day. I don't worry that someone's going to attack me when I go out of my house, but I'm cognizant, and I think I'm always kind of hypervigilant or on the alert, waiting to hear or see something that would make me, stop and think, am I safe under these circumstances?
How long do you think this is going to last?
I don't know. I'm hoping it would get better. Some of it may have to do with the political climate, and our organization, it's not one political party or the other. Like I said, we're not a gun club, and we're not doing this for political reasons, but until people can accord the same level of respect to all minority groups, whether they be religious or ethnic or gender-oriented, what bothers me is I think to myself, what if someone did this to any other group? Wouldn't there be more of an uproar? What bothers me isn't so much the overt anti-Semitism that I hear and see, but the number of people who stay silent and don't speak up. And I think that's the hardest part, because you feel like if we didn't have our group, we kind of feel like we're alone, that we have to protect ourselves because other people don't seem to want to stand up for us like they do for other groups who might be facing some kind of similar, prejudice.
Have you had someone say yet, though, from any religious background, like, there's got to be another way besides guns?
No one's actually said that to me. I haven't experienced that. We hope that there's another way besides having guns, and we certainly don't want to have to use the guns. It's just a matter of protecting ourselves. Like, for example, you go to the synagogue on Saturday morning, we have St. Paul police sitting in our front door. When I left Los Angeles, I didn't think I would see that in this part of the country, and this was, pre-October 7th. We had a security fence. We had an issue in Los Angeles. A white supremacist actually shot up the North Valley JCC and killed a postal employee. And LA became hyper alert, and they started worrying about security. We had airport screeners on the high holidays when we would go to services. We had a gate. You had to punch in a code to get in. I came here, I thought, well, it's the Midwest. I'm not going to see anything. The first thing I noticed, the buildings were all locked, and you had a buzz to be let in. And since October 7th, we no longer can be in the building without having some kind of armed security. We're lucky we have, the St. Paul Police. I'm sure it's part of our budget to pay for this. But I wonder if it's going to look what happened in the Catholic Church. You had the incident with the man that shot the kids in the chapel. And maybe other religions are starting to look at this and saying we all have to be aware of our own security. It's not just the Jewish community, but it seems to be disproportionately targeted at the Jewish community.
Did you ever think you'd be the face of this?
No,
guns?
I did not. No, I did not. I'm happy to bring what knowledge I have and volunteer my time to help get other people in the community to get involved. But no, I never saw myself. And then when Gail contacted me, she says, well, you're now officially the ambassador for our Twin Cities chapter. So
yeah, because for people,
it's a good feeling.
For people who can't see, Leslie, your feet do not touch the floor.
No,
in this
no,
chair.
I'm not the typical woman you would expect to see with a gun.
You're how tall?
I'm 4'11".
Yeah,
and I'm very petite. And when I first started shooting myself, I had to have my instructor stand behind me and put his hands on my shoulders because the first time I pulled the trigger, the recoil literally knocked me backwards off my feet. So now I can shoot one-handed. I've learned the skills. One other thing that I did do, though, I was involved when I was in Los Angeles. We had community-based policing after the civil unrest. So I was on the board for the local police station, and I went through LA's civilian academy. Well, we have one of these things in Egan too. They call it a Citizens Academy, and I went for that. And we went to the Egan Range to shoot on the last thing for our, the program. And they paired us up with a couple of people, and I know one woman was there, and she shot a couple times. She goes, "Yeah, I don't like this. I'm done." And I'm sitting there, it's like, "Oh, I'm empty," you know. And then they gave us an AR-15, and I learned how to shoot that. And I thought, okay, I probably don't need an assault weapon. I'm not a police officer, but you know, I'm not the typical person people would think of when they think about guns. So, yeah,
What's
it makes
next?
me an anomaly.
How can people find you
Oh,
or the group?
So Lox and Loaded has a website. I'll give you one of the cards when we're finished. People can go on the website. They can also go to the TC Jewfolk website and see the article that was written. My email is on there. I'm happy for anyone in the community who is interested in learning about Lox and Loaded or our activities. They can contact me. And I just hope that the movement grows and it brings our community together, because it's not just about learning the skills together, it's about being together and having a shared experience and making new friends and feeling comfortable and not feeling like we're a target anyway. And maybe once people stop and think, gee, the Jewish community knows how to protect itself, we would like to think, we'd hope that they would leave us alone. I don't know if that will happen, but let's say, you know, you can always call the police, but there is a response time lag. You know, it's like 10 minutes and 6 seconds in the city of Minneapolis. It's not that they don't want to come, but, you know, if there's crime and other things going on, it takes time. So just the fact that I think you can know that you can protect yourself if you have to, keep your friends and family and community safe, it gives you confidence. And when you carry yourself with confidence, you don't look like a target anymore.
Leslie, you've been very generous with your time.
Thank you.
We'll make sure to include links so people can find you and potentially
Yes,
get
please.
involved and join if they like. But thank you for taking the time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for showing an interest in Lox and Loaded.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today. I know your time is valuable, and I personally really enjoyed this conversation with Leslie, so I'm hoping that it was either interesting and enjoyable. You got something out of it as well. If this is your first time listening to Bigger Than Belief, thank you for checking this podcast out. We are a weekly interfaith podcast through WCCO television in Minneapolis. Our whole goal is to share real faith stories of people living in our community and beyond, and also to understand the big issues we see in our community, analyzing them through a faith lens. If you at all enjoyed this episode or found it interesting, please take us a moment and rate us 5 stars on whatever platform that you're listening to right now. If you haven't already, that only takes a moment, but helps us so much more than you might realize. Also, please take the time to send this episode to a friend or a moment to share some of the posts that we've been putting out on WCCO's social media page. You can also find all my personal social accounts just by searching up my name. We'll see you next week, folks, with another brand new episode. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you soon.